These are the statutes and the ordinances that you must diligently observe in the land that the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has given you to occupy all the days that you live on the earth. Okay, what's about to follow in the next many chapters is what you need to do once you've entered the land. Now, which law is going to come first of these many, many laws? Well, whichever one they choose, you'd think it would be relatively important. And indeed, such is the case here. First, we get a typical rejection of worship in the Canaanite manner. Right? You have to demolish all the places where the nations you're about to dispossess, and I'm using Canaanite as the blanket term for that, serve their gods on the mountains, the hills, under leafy trees. You're going to break down, so no altars, pillars, and sacred poles and idols. We don't do that. Right? Canaanites worshipped wherever they felt like it, out in the open, on hills, under trees. They used all this stuff. None of that. Okay, but what is it that we do or should do? And the answer that the text gives is not at all about the how, it's all about the where. There is only one place out of all the tribes where God will choose to put his name. Now, Deuteronomy will never name that place because Deuteronomy sort of knows its setting in the story, right? It's like centuries before Jerusalem even exists as an Israelite city. So it would be weird for it to say you put it in Jerusalem now and then have everybody ignore it until David comes along. But we know it's Jerusalem. That's what they mean. And what's being said here is that all worship of Israel's God has to happen at one location, which might seem almost natural for those of us who are used to the idea of the Jerusalem temple as the center of Israelite and Jewish worship. Yeah, of course they're worshiping in one place, and of course it's Jerusalem. But it's actually not natural at all, and it directly contradicts what Moses already told Israel directly from God back in Exodus. Right? In Exodus, it said, build an altar wherever, and I'll come to bless you there. That's the pre-Deuteronomy standard. But what could be more different from that than this? Take care that your burnt offerings, you do not offer your burnt offerings any place you happen to see, as opposed to Exodus, make me an altar of burnt offerings. Any place I cause my name to be remembered. Deuteronomy's not any place, only at the place that the Lord will choose in one of your tribes. That's where you're going to do all of it. Here, perhaps more than anywhere else, Deuteronomy is trying to impose something new. Israel was littered with local sanctuaries where people brought their sacrifices and prayed and celebrated. We see it in Exodus. We see it in the text we have here. We see it in Genesis, right? All over where the patriarchs found cultic sites like Bethel. We see it in the stories in Samuel, right? David goes and interacts with the priests at the temple at the city of Nob. We see it in Kings where Jeroboam sets up altars at sanctuaries in Dan and Bethel. We see it in the archaeological record. There's sanctuaries all over the place. But Deuteronomy wants to change all that. Wants to centralize worship in one single sanctuary. So if it's not an obvious thing, let's ask why. Why centralize worship? What's wrong with multiple sanctuaries? Well, there's a few possible reasons to centralize worship. There's a theological reason, right? Okay, we believe in one God, so one sanctuary, which assumes a sort of physical presence of the deity in the sanctuary, which of course is totally normal and standard for that time and place. I mean, how we couldn't have seen it any more clearly in Leviticus. So one God, one sanctuary, and also we should remember, or we should recognize that in ancient Israel and across the ancient Near East, different sanctuaries, even dedicated to the same deity, ended up claiming almost distinct manifestations of the deity. So in the archaeological record, in non-biblical texts, we have references to things like Yahweh of Samaria, right? As if the Samaritan, the sanctuary in Samaria was oh yes, here we worship the Yahweh of Samaria. Different somehow from the Yahweh of Jerusalem or the Yahweh of the south, to name other ones that are known to us. So Deuteronomy is saying, no. one God, one place. They might put it this way: the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, like literally unified, not scattered around different sanctuaries. So there could be a theological argument here, also, or a political one. Control over the worship of the deity is a major form of political power. This is why Jeroboam in the north sets up sanctuaries to compete with Jerusalem's. This is why David brought the ark to his new capital in Jerusalem, in the city of David, in the first place, right? There's political power in having and controlling the sanctuary. Could be economic. Sanctuaries were pilgrimage sites and probably were the most significant economic centers in ancient Israel and probably across the ancient world. Centralizing all of the pilgrimage business in one place would mean immensely increasing Jerusalem's economy, right? So it's just good business. Or centralization could have been externally imposed. At the end of the 8th century, the Assyrian king Sennacherib invaded the entire Levant and conquered basically all of it, except Jerusalem, famously. And we read about this in the Bible in King Hezekiah. The centralization of the cult may well have been an attempt to consolidate Israel's sacred places and objects and wealth in advance of this coming invasion. Could also be read as a reaction to the invasion, right? We say we're centralizing because we think it's a good thing, but the reality is there just weren't any more sanctuaries around Israel. The only remaining major site being that in Jerusalem. Any or all of these reasons may lie behind Deuteronomy's centralization program. But I'd venture to say that all of them are basically about aggregating power in Jerusalem. Centralization is inherently a power move, right? Bringing power from the margins to the center. It's a conscious anti-diversity position. Again, one that might strike us as totally natural. Of course, there's only one proper way to worship God. But in fact, that's not particularly natural, nor is it historically common. It is, in fact, a position that groups and individuals try to impose on others, right, to claim power and authority for their own particular beliefs and views. Right? The claim that there's in fact only one right way to do this and everything else is wrong. If you find it, I'll put it this way, if you find it unsettling when in our current political climate, some people have determined that their beliefs should become the law of the land and should be enshrined in the halls of power, then you might also find it unsettling when Deuteronomy tries to do the same.